Are you pregnant or a new parent looking to ensure a better postpartum experience? Or are you a birth worker looking to improve your postpartum care skills? Check out Thriving After Birth, an online self-paced course by me, midwife and educator Tanya Tringali. It's 10.5 hours of video content featuring experts in lactation, mental health, pelvic floor health, pediatric sleep issues. You also get worksheets and a workbook, as well as options to have a one-on-one session with me. Sign up at motherwitmaternity.com/thriving, and let's improve postpartum care together. Hey listeners, just a reminder that this is the final episode for this season. We're going to take a 4-week break and then we'll be back with season 3, and we have some really great stuff for you. In the meantime, I wanted to tell you guys what the 4 most popular episodes have been in case you missed them or you've joined us later. All right, coming in 4th place is an episode that aired on February 7th called Checking In with Liesl Teen, Mommy Labor Nurse. Great episode, especially if you are a mommy labor nurse lover. Coming in at number 3, what do midwifery and coaching pregnant and postpartum athletes have in common? An awesome episode if you are into fitness or you're trying to find your way back into fitness or navigate pregnancy through fitness. And by the way, we're going to have Rachel Mast back on in season 3 to give us some updates about her. Well, she'll share her birth story and she'll give us some updates on how her recovery has been going in terms of her return to fitness. All right, coming in the number 2 spot was my very first episode called Meet the Midwife. It's a short episode where I talk a bit about what my goals are here. I should probably listen to it again myself and see how things have evolved. All right, and in first place, this one racked up listens rapidly. It's the newest of all of these episodes and yet comes in first place, and it's called When Old Traumas Meet New Ones, Navigating This Journey with Mother Wit Mama Katrina Fields. This is about her journey of having a cancer diagnosis at a very young age and then having a 4th-degree laceration during her birth. It's a long episode, so you might want to listen to this one in a couple sittings or get super cozy, but this one has turned out to be extremely popular. All right, guys, I hope this gives you something to do while we're on a break. Be in touch with me. Please share your ideas, message me. I'm a real person and I'm really reachable. So Tanya at motherwitmaternity.com. Send me voice memos. I'm really interested in hearing your voices, sharing your opinions, and giving you what it is that you're looking for. Have a great month. Today is Anne Smanik. She's a friend, fellow CrossFitter, a CrossFit coach, and a pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach. She's also a chef and entrepreneur, woman of many talents. I wanted to have her on the show to share her birth stories. And actually, more importantly, I wanted her to talk us through why she had a hospital birth with her first baby and chose to have a home birth with her second. This is so important for people planning a pregnancy or who are pregnant to hear, because Anne's story is not unique, meaning many people have a first baby in the hospital for a variety of reasons, but partly, if not entirely, because they were raised believing that this is the safest way to do things, and they simply don't question it as a norm. But for many young, healthy women, having a baby is often the first time that they are, quote, a patient in the hospital system. And many will walk away from this experience feeling either unsupported or as if they fought an uphill battle. Some will be traumatized by their experience. Obstetric violence and coercion are real. And that's not to negate that many people also have a good experience. But home birth gets put saying it politely, even on the back burner because of some of these things. So some people have received this inaccurate memo that home birth is unsafe, and it is simply not true. It is a product of the way research is done and framed. And then what the media does as well in creating taglines, which we know happens in many situations, right? This is not unique. Many people don't know what a midwife is. They don't know what we do or where we do it, right? So even with all of this stigma against home birth, it's really interesting to me that when I tell someone I'm a midwife, the most common initial response, well, other than what is a midwife, right? I get that aplenty. But if they know what a midwife is, the next most common response is, so that means you deliver babies at home, right? And the truth is that only a small percentage of all certified midwives and certified nurse midwives attend births at home. Most of us actually work in hospitals. But there's another type of midwife that I just have to mention, the certified professional midwife, right? And they primarily attend home births, but not in New York State. And that's where Anne's 2 babies were born. So we're kind of focusing there. Do check out season 1, episode 12, where I interviewed Rachel Mast, who is a CPM, certified professional midwife in Ohio. She also happens to be a pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach, CrossFit coach, the whole bit. So she fits into this realm. It's definitely one of the most popular episodes I've recorded to date. So it seems that people are really enjoying that one. Anyway, I'm rambling on here, and I do want to pass the mic to Anne because you don't need to hear me on my soapbox anymore, right? You need to hear a healthcare consumer's journey to home birth and why and how that happened. I hope you enjoy the show. Oh, and a gentle reminder that nothing we discuss on this show should ever be considered medical advice. Please speak to your local provider about anything that comes up in this show that resonates with you and your needs and your health care. Well, I do hear a little baby grunting over there. Who's that?
Charlie.
That's Charlie. This is your newest baby, who's how old now?
He's 4 months as of yesterday, 2 days ago.
Hi, gorgeous. So nice to see you. All right. Anne, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Of course.
I'm really excited for you to share your story with everyone. I've been thinking about this pretty much since the day you had your baby, and I just wasn't going to pester you about it for a little while.
You could have pestered me. It's fine.
I know. Okay, so I gave a little intro for you already, but hi, I'm getting big smiles. I have to just interact. Hi, you're so cute. You know how to talk to virtual humans. It's a modern world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Anne, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your personal life, your professional life, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Sure. So so I'm mom of 2 boys now, 3 and 4 months. Before I was their mom, I was a pastry chef in the city for a long time. Got extremely burnt out because that is a rough industry to be in, especially when you start off as a teenage girl in New York City in a kitchen. So I got pretty burnt out pretty quickly. Somehow transitioned to coaching CrossFit. I don't know exactly how. My husband, when we started dating, Dave, he was doing CrossFit at 6 a.m. and I was like, where the hell are you going at 5 in the morning? Like, I thought it was crazy. I was a rock climber at the time. And he ended up getting me into CrossFit. Continued to coach after I had my first son. While I was pregnant with him, got certified as a pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach, mostly due to questions not being answered by my OB.
About yourself, obviously.
Yeah, regarding exercise. My questions didn't go answered, so I was like, I'm going to find my own answers here. And when I realized other people also had those questions that weren't getting answered, I decided to pursue the certification so I can help other people out, since I realized I wasn't alone there. That's about it. Right now, I'm working on starting a business, not in the fitness world, but more parenting world. It's going to be a space where I can gather people who are experts in their field to host classes and like support circles for parents, like childbirth classes, infant feeding, whether it's breastfeeding or bottle or formula feeding, support, like infant first aid, CPR, support circles for parents, new parents, veteran parents, parents who are experiencing loss, and then classes for kids like just play and music and dance, because that has all gone away during COVID and seemingly never coming back. And parents in the neighborhood are lamenting the loss of those classes. So just trying to build a community of parents, because we're kind of lacking that at the moment. So,
And this will be in Brooklyn?
yeah, in Sunset Park.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Well, you'll have to keep us posted on the progress.
Yeah, it's like, it was a weird dream during a nighttime feeding, and then once I started talking about it out loud, people thought it was not so crazy. So it's happening pretty quickly, quicker than I expected.
I'm really proud of you, because I know firsthand, obviously, how hard it is to flex your entrepreneurial muscles, right? It's tough and it's scary, and I did not have the guts to do it in New York City, right? So I left New York City. So the fact that you're doing it in New York City is pretty mind-blowing. I'm really proud of you.
Doing it in New York City and taking my 4-month-old along for all my meetings, and
As you should.
using my motherhood as an asset. Idea wouldn't have happened without this guy right down here. So
Yeah. It's kind of corny when people like say what I'm about to say, but like hashtag mompreneur.
Yeah.
Like that's where it's at. Like that's what you're doing. And I totally get these groups that form around being a particular type of entrepreneur, or feeling like, it's hard when you're a new mom to even like see outside of being around other
Totally.
young moms with babies, because our priorities are so different from other people.
Yes. Priorities are different, and just like your expectations of what can happen in a day. Like,
Yeah,
I put like 2 things on my to-do list, and if they get done, I feel accomplished.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's nice to be around people who are also in that same boat.
Yeah, totally. Well, it sounds like you guys are going to do great things, and I can't wait to see it in action. All right, so let's dive into why I brought you on. In full disclosure, I remember bits and pieces of your first pregnancy, and I saw you often enough, and I kind of remember that. And then I feel like it fell off my radar, but then it kind of obviously popped back up when you were pregnant with baby number 2, and we talked a few times, and then you were on my radar more because you were making such interesting changes in your life as it pertained to your pregnancy. So you've stayed in my mind a lot more since then. So, but I want you to take us back. And I know that can be hard almost even for oneself in retrospect. I want you to take us back to the person that you were and the beliefs that you held around medical care, particularly as it pertains to pregnancy, what you thought you were supposed to do, what you truly believed you should do, and then tell us a little bit about how all that played out.
I have been a patient in a hospital before. It wasn't my first experience with that. I have asthma. I've had asthma attacks. I also had I call it the pneumonia ordeal, where I went to the ER, not breathing. They told me to stop being hysterical and calm down and go home. So I've had some really bad interactions with the medical system, but at the same time, I didn't know what I didn't know. So when I became pregnant, I just kind of like, I went to my GP to like get it confirmed, and she was like, here's an OB I went to when I was pregnant. They're great. Go there. And I just kind of like, okay, sure. Like I didn't know any better. So I went that route. Did not have great experience my whole pregnancy with my care, but again, didn't know that there was a better option. It's complete ignorance on my part.
So you're saying it never occurred to you to leave your doctor, even for another doctor?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't know to pursue other options, especially stupid seeing you on a regular basis at the gym. Like I could have been like, hey Tanya, but
Well, it's funny because one of the things I remember, which is why I don't remember much about your first pregnancy, is that I remember, I don't know, trying to engage you in a conversation a couple times. And I remember feeling like, oh, I'm not sure she really wants to talk about this with me. And I just kind of backed off because I do always worry that I'm going to come off too strong with a particular point of view or anything like that. And so I just really pick my place depending on how someone approaches me with what they want to talk about.
yeah. I also think like pre-kids, I was just, I don't know, not open to talking about so many things. And I mean, post kids, there's like a lot of people seeing a lot of things when you're giving birth, so all that kind of goes out the window, and you become a lot more open to talking about something. I think.
I love that. That's great.
Literally, everyone's seeing everything. So
That's funny.
I think I was just like, a little more reserved pre first birth.
Can you say a couple examples maybe of what happened in your pregnancy care that was making you feel, even though you say I didn't know any better, it was out of ignorance, but like what were you feeling wasn't, that you weren't enjoying or that wasn't right?
It just kind of like, I think this a pretty common thing that people have with just any doctor visit, like it's 10 minutes, and if they made eye contact with me for 5 seconds, that was a long time. And just feeling like I was just like, all right, we're done here, go away. And for it being such a big part of your life, so life changing being pregnant, especially for the first time, it just didn't, I just didn't like it. It just like emotionally, it just felt like so stiff and uncomfortable. I didn't have any complications, like all that stuff was totally fine. I just, the lack of like bedside manner and empathy was kind of rubbing off.
Yeah. I find myself saying often in conversation with people that I wish that there was a bedside manner test to get into medical school. Because not all doctors are bad. Of course, I don't mean to make this huge generalization, but when you talk to women about these things day in and day out, there are very common themes, and you know that you're expressing that as well, that you know you're not alone in feeling this way. And at some point the writing's on the wall. Like people don't feel particularly cared for, or you know, a common reason people come to me, right, is that they have their laundry list of questions that are all totally valid and deserve to be answered. And they walk into the room with some level of excitement about getting their questions answered. And they're just slowly putting it away because they realize it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like you're never going to get those questions answered. And there's no opportunity that's going to arise for that to happen.
Yeah.
And that's so sad.
Yeah. It was just, again, it's life changing, and it's just like you get 10 minutes and maybe some eye contact and move on.
And so did some of these things persist into your birth, or is your birth experience kind of in a separate pocket?
Pretty much it felt the same, but also kind of worse about the birth experience with my first. The OB that was on call was someone in the practice who I'd seen a few times, but again, like if she made eye contact with me that night, I don't remember. So it was the night of the super blood wolf moon, and I think she was outside the hospital looking at the moon more than she was like in my room talking to me, which I know like she's not going to be in the room at all times, but also there was, I think, one other baby born that night in the hospital, like not super busy, but she was taking pictures on her iPhone of a moon instead of like helping me feel okay about what was going on, it being my first birth and being a little scared. So it felt not really supported in that way. And then also just kind of felt like I didn't have any say in what was going on. I chose to get an epidural. That was my decision, but it was they gave me too high a dose and I couldn't feel my contractions. And I had to be told when they were happening, and I had nurses kind of like telling me what positions to get into. I felt completely unattached from what was going on. And it felt really bad. Like it felt bad at the time and it feels bad after. And it's such a hard thing to cope with because like I had an awesome baby who's an awesome 3-year-old now and I love him so much. And to say that I regret things surrounding his birth are really hard. And I know it's common and I've talked to other moms who feel the same way and it's just it sucks.
Yeah, totally. Did you, when you say they had to tell you when you were contracting, I'm assuming you're talking about when it was time to push.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I felt nothing.
Like,
Absolutely
no,
nothing.
you couldn't feel an ounce of pressure on your own, nothing.
Yeah.
How long did you end up pushing for?
I think it was like between 30 minutes and 45 minutes, somewhere around there.
Ooh, well done.
Yeah. Both my boys came up pretty quickly. My first James birth or like labor total was 5 hours from like starting to feel contractions to him coming out. And this guy was about 2.5.
Wow. How tall are you?
5'9".
Yeah. So, I mean, this is not me just saying this. This is actually like in the literature. Taller women have an easier time giving birth. It just is true. It's not always true, but statistically it's true, right? And you are, I realized, I was like, yeah, she's tall. I forget. Okay. So at what point did you first say to yourself, when I have another baby, I'm going to do something different? Like, how did that unfold? Like, because you didn't know what you didn't know, and at some point you knew something. How did that happen?
When I was still in the hospital with James at first.
Oh, okay. So right away.
Yeah, I didn't like the experience from start to finish, and I was like, I don't know about any other ways to do this, but I'm going to find out because I don't want to do this again. I want to have another kid, but it's not going to be this way. So it was
so interesting to me to hear you say with such clarity this piece about, you know, what you didn't know, what you didn't know, and then to have this nearly immediate thought that is like, I still don't know, but I know I'm not doing this.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I feel a lot of regret around his birth, James, but like I try not to dwell on that because he's here and he's awesome. But
and it sounds like so much of who you've become in the years that have passed is a product of that.
Oh, for sure.
That's a really beautiful thing. It's kind of like, I know a lot of healthcare providers, whether they're nurses, midwives, doctors, whatever, people who got into what they got into, or birth workers in general, even doulas, who some subset of those people do what they do because of a bad experience. And another subset do what they do because of a good experience. I'm on the other side. I had a baby very young, but I had an amazingly powerful experience with a midwife. And I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm doing what she does for people. And I knew that while I was pregnant, before the baby, before I even had labor, I knew that because I was having such a powerful experience just going to office visits with a midwife, right? But I have midwife friends who have had like 4 C-sections and have lots of feelings about not having had a vaginal birth, and they have traumatizing stories about some of those C-sections, and you know they are the person that they wished they had.
Yeah.
And you in some ways are becoming, so I can tell you're becoming somebody in the community that people are going to look to in so many ways, and it wouldn't have happened without that first experience.
For sure. It's James' birth made me learn a lot. Made me pursue like learning all of this stuff.
So you have this thought really early on while you're in the hospital. How does it become more tangible in the months to follow?
So he had trouble nursing from the start. He had a tongue and lip tie that was pretty bad. And I got no support in the hospital for that. So I had to pursue my own. And just from pursuing like the lactation support and all of that, I just, once I started like researching that stuff, I just kind of like went down the whole birth world rabbit hole, and my entire Instagram feed is like doulas, midwives, pelvic floor physical therapists, like pediatric PTs. Like that is the world that I exist in. Yet I don't do any of, like, that's not my job, but it's just, I find all of it fascinating and want to know all of it.
I would argue that as a pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach, all of that is your job.
Sure.
Because now you are exposed to people on every point of the journey, and you get to be a point where you redirect somebody or open somebody's mind to an option that they didn't know was available to them.
Yeah.
That's
I
very
just
cool.
love telling people to go get pelvic floor physical therapy, because I think 80% of the time they've never heard of it. I'm just like, yes, please
Yes,
explore it. It's amazing.
exactly, for sure. And is most of your encounter, this is a little aside, are most of your encounters with pregnant and postpartum people related to coaching at the gym, or is this more social out in the world as a mom?
It's now more social because I'm at the gym less. After I had Charlie, it's been hard to get back in there coaching.
Got it. And does the gym, do they call on you when there's a pregnant client? Do they refer them to you to talk to you?
I have a woman that I'm working with currently who reached out to me because Coach Chris had her in a class and she said something, and he was like, "Oh, hey, I know someone who can help you." So
got it.
Yeah.
Big shout out to CrossFit 718 for doing the right thing with their pregnant postpartum athletes. Okay, so let's carry on here with your story. So in the months that follow, you get introduced to a whole new world through your lactation journey. And you start to understand, oh, that's what midwives are doing and all of this stuff.
Well, you were at our house like the day after James came home. You heard like that he was having a feeding problem. You were like at our door before we were.
Yeah, because I know what, and you know this now, I'm preaching to the choir now, but I know that early intervention is key.
Yeah.
If we don't get in there and start helping right away, we go down the road that we didn't necessarily mean to go down, right? And I always want to differentiate between somebody who chooses to formula feed and someone who ends up formula feeding who had breastfeeding goals, but they didn't get to play out because they simply lacked the support they needed, right? You've turned out to be a very successful breastfeeder, as you breastfeed right now in front of me. You know, you enjoy breastfeeding, you wanted it badly, and we just needed to get you on the right path. And I'm not a lactation consultant, I'm a midwife, but like, I wasn't going to let you not get immediate help while you were waiting for the more skilled help.
If I had just relied on the support I got in the hospital, James would have been formula fed for sure.
Yeah.
Which is, again, like I'm not going to knock formula feeding if that's what you choose, but it wasn't what I chose. So.
Right. That's exactly the point. And I definitely other podcast episodes on this show have explored this theme more, especially when the main topic is tongue tie, whether it's with a client or a professional. But we talk a lot about, and it's unfortunate, I feel bad saying this, but the lactation support that is often available in the hospital, it's not every single lactation consultant, I find is often lacking. And I think, I don't know for sure, but I've had lactation consultants tell me that I'm on the right track with this. I think what's happening is if a lactation consultant only ever sees the first couple days of life, they're just not exposed to a lot of different stuff. And I know from my own experience of, you know, just working as a regular old midwife and my main interactions being just those first few days. And then again, at 6 weeks postpartum, all the problems happen in between. Right? The first couple days, you can make a million excuses. Oh, some babies aren't interested till your milk comes in. Oh, he's just sleepy. We got the wrong window, right? So we make all these excuses. We put the baby on the breast for you. We've, you know, set the face up in just the right way. We convince ourselves that everything looks right. And I really think it's important that people have access to lactation consultants out in the community. And I make my clients find that person beforehand. We're not going to rely on just who's showing up at work that day at the hospital and say, what do you mean? I had a lactation consultant. It's not the same.
Yeah. And also like James was born at just before midnight, and the lactation group for like the whole recovery floor was at like 7 a.m. I didn't know how my baby was feeding. I didn't know what was normal for babies in general, for him in particular. I just didn't know. Again, I don't know what I don't know. So I'm going in there and she's like, do you have any questions? I'm like, maybe not right now because I haven't slept and I don't know what should be happening. So I don't know if this is normal. So,
right.
And it was it. There was just that one group session where I hadn't slept all night. And so, yeah, without pursuing lactation help, I wouldn't have learned all this. James would have been formula fed, which again, fine, but not my choice. So,
yeah, I hear you. All right. So you knew you were going to have a second baby always. You knew immediately that you were going to do something different. You had no clue what it was. At what point did you start to get clarity around where you were heading, and how did you go about making that informed decision?
They were about 3 years apart, so had some time to do some research and learning around the whole like birth world. Did more reading about midwives and doulas and all this. I really, what I would have loved was a birth center birth, but then realized that they don't exist in New York City anymore, which is a shame because you had your daughter at a birth center, right?
I did. They closed a gazillion years ago. So it was called the Elizabeth Seton Childbearing Center, and it was on 14th Street between, I think it was 8th and 9th Avenue.
Yeah.
And that closed when she was like 3 years old, so 19 years ago.
But it sounded so beautiful and nice and warm.
Yeah. So I think I knew this and then forgot. You're telling me that the Brooklyn Birthing Center is no more?
No more. Yeah.
Aha. Okay. So there really isn't an option for you. It's hospital or home.
Yeah. And I wasn't sold on home birth just because we were renters and I don't love our home like that we're currently in. It's not our forever home. It's totally serves its purpose now. But in my head, a home birth was like super comfortable in like your house that you own with all like it's just like it felt warmer than like the feelings I get about my current home.
Yeah.
So like I was torn because I really didn't want a hospital birth again, but I wasn't sold on the home birth, and there being no birth centers, it took me a long time to decide what was going to be where we were going to have Charlie.
So wait, I have a question. You are talking about your rationale for being, not super excited about a home birth being about your actual apartment and how you feel about the apartment. Was there nothing if you were in your dream home, would a home birth have very immediately risen to the top, or did you have any concerns whatsoever about having a home birth for the reasons that you clearly know I'm alluding to?
We hope you're enjoying the Mother Wit podcast. If you are, please rate us and leave a review in iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to your podcast. Thanks so much. Now, back to the show.
It was primarily just because like I don't feel very like this is not my warm and cozy. So it felt weird to me before then to plan a home birth at a place where I don't get the warm and fuzzies about it.
But you weren't afraid of home birth, I guess, just to be really pointed. Okay, got it.
And it was maybe a little bit of ignorance. My first pregnancy was pretty uneventful. I had no reasons to be concerned about a second pregnancy having any complications or anything. I know that home birth is not safe for everybody, but for me, it seemed like a totally valid option. So
you were an amazingly perfect home birth candidate. With that said, you still had some stuff that happened, and we'll talk about that at the end. I'm going to save that. That's just a little teaser. You had a little drama at your home birth, I know. So you weren't afraid of home birth. That's really what I was trying to get at, because I didn't know if there was a time, there's the time you didn't know what you didn't know, but I also didn't know what society had kind of gotten in your head about, right?
Yeah, her stories about needing interventions that weren't available at home.
Yeah, it can absolutely be the reverse, right? And I mean, your epidural story is minor in terms of when we're talking about like life and death and things like that, of course, but not having an epidural available prevents you from having that situation. Certainly for me, part of the reason I chose a birth center birth, very much like you, I was in an apartment situation where I was like, I don't want to have a baby here. This isn't even comfortable, right? Like the birth center was actually comfortable at a much bigger space, bigger bed, bigger tub. All the things were bigger and better than I could have had at home. So yes, big thing played in there. But I knew that I needed to not be in a hospital or I wouldn't be able to not have an epidural. That was what I knew about myself. If drugs were near me, I was going to take them and I didn't want to. So I had to put myself in a situation where getting to the drugs was hard to do.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway, okay. All right. So you are now not yet pregnant, but you're thinking, what am I going to do next time? Am I going to have a home birth or hospital birth? There's no more birth centers in New York City.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then you're pregnant finally.
Yeah.
And
I reach out to you and you connect me with Chris, who is Angel.
So wait, I want everyone to know who Chris is. I actually texted her this morning because I was like just feeling all the warm and fuzzies preparing for talking to you today. And I just wanted to make sure she knew that I think she's like the best. And I do. I love Chris.
I agree. I second that.
Yeah, so Chris McCloskey, she's a home birth midwife in New York City. Her practice is called City Midwifery. I'll make sure all of this is in the show notes. At the time that I told Anne about her, I'm certain that I said, she's so cool. She does home, hospital, and birth center births. And now I realize she no longer does birth center births, which is a real bummer because it sounds like you would have done that with her if you could have. So is it the case that you met Chris and you were so sold on Chris that it just nudged you over to the home birth category? Is that what happened?
She convinced me that it will be comfortable and it'll be what I want it to be, even if it's not our dream forever home.
Mm-hmm.
And she was right. She turned out to be totally right about that, as she is about everything. Pregnancy. But yeah, she just made me feel so comfortable. And also I think it was just her presence was so warm and comfortable. I was like, if she's there with me, that'll help me no matter what. I also got a really amazing doula who also was like, everyone who was at the home birth just made it so comfortable that it didn't matter that I hate the tile floors that are in the entire place, and I hate it. So
can you tell everyone a couple things, just like you did at the beginning, about what didn't feel right about your doctor's visits with the first pregnancy, I should say. What were some of the biggest, most notable differences of receiving care from a midwife?
The visits were long. I'm pretty sure they're like half an hour, but it felt like forever because we could talk about everything. And the questions that she asked just, well, like some of them were unexpected, totally made sense in the long run. Like she found out everything she needed to know to make sure, first of all, that I was a good candidate for home birth so that things would go okay as possible, which I appreciate because if I hadn't been a good candidate, I would have wanted to know start.
And your midwife wants to know too, right? None of us want to be in a situation where we increase the likelihood of having severe complications at home. We don't want that. We don't enjoy risking people out of home birth, but it's our job to do so if it's what happens. And I think that's one of the things that people don't understand about what makes home birth so safe is that we don't let just everyone have a home birth, right? We advise people on the best place based on their health status.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the visits were just so long compared to an OB visit, and we had actual conversations. It wasn't just like, you feel okay? All right, cool. Let's check you out. You're fine. All right, go home. It felt like we just had a good relationship.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I think what I'm hearing is that you're asked a lot of questions that you wouldn't even know that you should be thinking about or asking yourself, but she makes you think critically and carefully about how you're feeling and the care you're receiving. And it feels like a partnership.
Yes. And I had some like GI issues that figured out I worked with a dietitian to figure it out. Turns out I am now sensitive to caffeine, which is perfect timing for having a second kid, not being able to have caffeine anymore. She worked with my dietitian. They spoke back and forth directly. So that was nice to have them all like looped in there. I just felt totally taken care of and cared for.
Yeah, I think that what you just said actually is another major point that doesn't get stated enough about why midwives are a safe option, regardless of where they deliver. It's that we are really awesome team players. We don't feel the need to like be the end all be all. I know all the answers and I'm going to tell you what you need to do. And that's the end of the story. Done. Leave now. We love to work with other people and collaborate and learn from the dietitian, from the pelvic floor PT. And we share our clients very readily and happily with others who we know can improve the quality of their life. And I think people really don't know that. And I don't think we as midwives even talk about that enough. You know, we talk about that internally as a tenet of our practice, but I don't know that we explicitly say that to people.
Yeah, she was totally open to working with whoever else I was working with and totally interested in hearing what was coming of that. And it was really cool. I really appreciated that.
So here's another question I didn't even know I was going to ask you. And this will come around a little bit more to the pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coaching. You said you became one because you weren't getting the answers from your OB. Now, I know that Chris is not like some fitness expert. How did you feel talking about fitness with each of them? And how was that like presented differently, or how was it received by you differently?
I felt more confident talking to Chris about it. I think I also just have a better like vocabulary for it now, having gone through the certification and working with other pregnant people. So I think I just in general am more confident talking about it. But I also felt understood and felt like she trusted that I had my own answers in that for that kind of stuff. I felt like she trusted me on that, which was great.
Cool. Awesome. All right. How do you feel about telling us a little bit about your birth story?
Sure. So Charlie was born on January 31st this year. It's a couple of days, like 2-3 days before his due date. His brother came a little earlier than that. So we were expecting an early birth and he came almost right on time. Just hanging out on the couch on a Monday night and my water broke. Which I hadn't experienced with my first, so that was a new feeling for me. I was like, something feels funny. Went to the bathroom, my water had broken. My contractions started pretty quickly after that. There was no time to figure out what was going on. They came pretty fast and pretty hard. They started 5 minutes apart, and I called Chris immediately because she had warned me. Also, I took home birth classes with Tanya Wills.
Right on. Big shout out to Tanya Wills. She's the best.
She was amazing. And in the class, she had warned me. She's like, call Chris right away as soon as anything happens. It's like, okay, everybody, we're going to call her right away.
Got the memo.
Yeah. So I did. And she also wasn't in the neighborhood. So that was a fantastic coincidence just to have her close by. But she got here in about 20 minutes. And by that time, my contractions were 2 minutes apart. So it was like, I was already on my hands and knees, like over the ball, like eyes closed. Like, I don't know. I know that she showed up first and then like her assistant and the doula, I don't know who showed up in what order because my eyes were closed like before Chris even got there. And I think they were closed the whole time. I was like, I can't. Like the contractions came hard and fast. So the details are very blurry. And I was really comfy on that ball, but Chris is like, you cannot stay here. I was like, but I need to.
Why did she not want you to stay there?
It just wasn't, it wasn't progressing there. Like it was my comfortable spot, but nothing was really happening down there.
Yeah.
So they got me up, and I know we tried like sitting on the toilet for a little bit, but for some reason or another, I think I just wasn't comfortable there. It wasn't happening.
So when
So
you say it wasn't happening, I'm assuming I'm starting to get a picture here that you were probably fully dilated really quickly.
I believe so.
Uh-huh. And so what I'm guessing is like they were trying to get you to have an urge to push. Is that what was happening?
I was having the urge to push like all on my own really intensely.
Oh, okay.
Again, it's a little blurry.
Totally.
Again, I only opened my eyes when I totally
Because
had.
I think the reason I'm like needling on this a little bit is because on one hand, I'm hearing you had this really fast labor. So on the other hand, talking about something not happening, I'm like, it all happened really fast. So what wasn't happening, right? So that's my brain trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish I knew the details.
It's all good. You were in labor land where you belong, and I'm asking you questions you can't answer. It's fine. So
There's
okay.
people in this room who know what's going on right now. It's not me. I'm just
Yeah. Okay, so obviously you were eventually pushing, and you know, it sounds like you already said you didn't push for very long once you started pushing.
Yeah. I ended up pushing Charlie out standing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say standing, I mean leaning on my husband Dave with all of my weight and him holding me up. I don't think I was
Good thing
standing.
he's a big buff CrossFitter.
Exactly. Luckily, he could support me because I don't think I was supporting myself, but I was technically standing up, and pushed out Charlie. And at some point in there, Dave did attempt to blow up like the pool. But when Chris got there, she was just like, "It's happening too quickly. Just don't even bother with that." So, so it was pretty quick. And it's funny. Dave picked Charlie up, and he's like, feels like he's like over 10 pounds, and the assistant's like, I don't know about that. That's pretty rare. And then they weigh him, and he's 11 and a half pounds.
Insane. 11 and a half pounds.
Yeah. I think Chris said that he is the biggest baby that she's caught outside of a hospital, like the biggest home birth that she's caught.
Wild. I mean, it's a dumb question, but I'm going to ask anyway. What did that feel like to push an 11 and a half pound baby out? Like, did your brain consciously say this feels huge or not?
Part of my like having had a bad first experience is that I don't know. I don't have anything to compare to, even though I already had given birth vaginally.
You couldn't feel anything.
So I don't know. Like it just felt painful.
Well, and I'm assuming the reason you had an urge to push always was because he probably had a giant head, as he should, at 11 and a half pounds. And so you were feeling like rectal pressure just from the size of his head, let alone it being low enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The urge to push came pretty quickly. Oh my God. Pretty fiercely.
All right. So you had an 11 and a half pound baby standing up in your living room. And then what happened?
So sat down, got a little snuggle in, and then Chris was like, all right, time to get the placenta coming out. And it just wasn't happening. So she was like, all right, let's try a different approach. Went onto my bed and gotten different positions and just wasn't coming out. So she's like, sorry to do this, but I have to go in. And she ended up having to go in and manually remove my placenta. That was worse than pushing out an 11 and a half pound baby for sure. That was the roughest part of it all.
Yeah, it's pretty awful.
It took about an hour, I think,
for the placenta to come. She waited an hour for it to come, and then she got it out.
Something like that. Yeah, the timing is a little fuzzy, but something like that.
Did you have any problems with bleeding, or she got it out manually and you never really bled a lot?
Bled a lot.
You bled a lot. Were you bleeding before it came out, or you started bleeding after?
That I'm not clear on.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that I lost a lot of blood because I couldn't, when everything was all done, they let me rest for a while, but then they're like, do you want us to help you take a shower? And I was like, that sounds great. I could not even sit up in bed, never mind stand up and get out of bed.
Mm.
So I had lost a lot of blood. But they're angels and gave me a little sponge bath in my bed. I was like, it was nice. But
So at the risk of this sounding scary for our listeners, I want to reframe it just a little bit and say there are so many things that we can do when complications arise at home. When we talk about home birth, we often talk about, really very much wanting the perfect birth that doesn't have any complications, but complications do happen, and we are very well trained to deal with a lot of them. And as Anne tells her story, she had a very large baby and a retained placenta, and yes, she lost some blood, but like all was well. Do you feel any sort of retrospective trauma from this birth?
No, and maybe I should have been, but I wasn't scared
Mm-hmm.
in the moment, because I also felt in control. Like whenever it did hurt too much, Chris was like, she let me rest. She eventually be like, all right, we do have to try again, and I was okay because she gave me choices. She let me decide when I needed to rest and all that. So I felt a lot more in control, even when things weren't going perfectly. And I did feel like I was being taken care of, even though things weren't going perfectly during it and after. I felt more in control even when I wasn't really. So
What I haven't asked you is how Dave took your choice for home birth up front and how he did at the actual birth.
When I first mentioned it, he was just like, huh, okay. Like I don't think he realized that was a thing that was an option for us. And he was like, all right, like didn't ask too many questions. And then when Chris did her home visit, so like probably around like it was somewhere in the 30s, like week 36 or something like that. Then he finally had some questions. Mostly, I think instinctively, like, what if something is like happens to my wife or my kid? Like, what do we do then? Those are mostly his questions, which I think is just him making sure that we're okay.
I think everyone deserves to have those questions answered 100%.
Yeah. And she answered them and he felt good about that. And he was like, all right, you made this choice. This choice sounds good. Was fully supportive of it. In the moment, he was fantastic. Again, he was holding almost 200 pounds of me at the time, standing up. He's really good emotional support for me in general. So, he was fantastic. And I just totally threw him into this. Like the home birth classes were online and we did them together. But I still feel like he just kind of got thrown into this because I had prepared myself like for a while with what this would look like. And I think he really only fully took it in the moment.
Yeah, it's funny because it makes me think a little bit about how when the pandemic hit, especially in New York City, I really can't speak to other places so much in terms of understanding home birth communities elsewhere, but a gazillion people who were very pregnant suddenly wanted home births, and it was such an interesting time for conversation around home birth because as much as the community of home birth midwives, and I hope all midwives, regardless of where they catch babies, should get behind that, it was clear that people were coming to home birth for the wrong reason sometimes, right? And so that was such an interesting time of helping people decide, is this actually right for you? Because you can't have a successful home birth if the only reason you're doing this is fear of COVID. You have to feel totally safe and supported in your home, or it's not the right choice for you, no matter what.
100%. And it has a lot to do with the people that you're surrounding yourself with. And Chris is an angel. She's amazing and so comforting. And then my doula, Maddie, was also so supportive and comforting. And I'm in touch with her currently, like for the the project I'm working on, I really want her to collaborate with me because she's just a delightful person to be around, and she's a newer doula, but she's so like she's already, I think, really knowledgeable and like so eager to learn more. And I've surrounded myself with the right people. So.
Well, I love new doulas actually, because they're so eager to learn and they're so excited to be around birth. And honestly, that's really all it takes to be a good doula. What really is the icing on the cake is there a midwife typically, because I just don't think doctors engage in the same way in general, who's willing to do some teaching and some partnering so that they can build their tool bag in those early births. But in general, I recommend newer doulas to people all the time, in part because they're often more affordable. So that's a big reason. And I don't see it as a downside, to be honest, obviously.
Same. I did not, Chris recommended, she's like, you should get a newer doula. So I reached out, found a few, I chose Maddie.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate giving someone a chance when they're new at something, because everyone needs to, the only way they're going to learn is by doing. Mm-hmm. So I was like, come get some experience.
Awesome.
We both win here. I get support, you get experience. It was fantastic.
All right. I'm going to ask you 3 more questions as we wrap up. I'm curious what it was like, either before the birth or after, or both, to talk to people about your choice, because when you're in such an extreme minority, as we often are with using a midwife and then adding the home birth layer, right? People say some interesting things. And so did you find yourself having to defend your decisions, or how did you navigate those conversations before and after?
I did definitely have to defend it to some people. It's mostly this like, what like online can be referred to like concern trolling, except in real life. People are like, well, what if everything goes wrong? Like, well, all these things can also go wrong in a hospital, and they're not always fixed in a hospital. Like, some things just happen and they're gonna happen. And I think you have to be ready for that no matter where you give birth. Some things can totally be fixed in a hospital, not everything can. So I was just, I don't know, it didn't feel genuine, all of the concern people were kind of throwing my way. It just kind of felt like they just had to kind of be a little combative sometimes.
Well, it sounds like they're throwing you their unassessed fears.
Yes.
They don't know the research, they don't know the world, and these are the things that would make them choose a hospital birth, because they don't know what they don't know. Just as you started, it all comes full circle.
And also like the stats of like infant mortality and maternal mortality and all that. Home births, what, like 1% of all births in this country? So, I mean, just by the numbers, hospital births are like a pretty risky, I'd say a little riskier, because like sometimes like one intervention leads to another, and somewhere in there, something happens that didn't have to happen in the first intervention.
And it also goes back to your early healthcare experiences that had nothing to do with birth. And that was basically having an asthma attack and being told that you're hysterical. So there's something wrong with the way 51% of our population is treated in any healthcare experience.
Exactly.
And then, of course, it depends on other factors, where we live and what color we are and all of these things.
Being a white woman who's very middle class, and even I was told I was being hysterical when I literally could not breathe. So I'm not anti-doctor, I'm not anti medicine. I need medicine every day to keep me breathing, but not every birth has to be a medical procedure. So
very, very true. Okay, so we may have already said this one, but I'm just curious, or I probably said it, but I'm curious what you think. What do you think the biggest misconception is out there about midwives and or home birth?
About home birth, that it's unsafe.
Simple as that, just that it's unsafe. Okay, fair.
And another thing that was being lobbed at me was that, well, it's not sterile. Like, well, labor and delivery room is not sterile either.
And birth is not sterile. Your vagina is not sterile. Hey, folks, your vagina is not sterile. Just public service announcement.
You might be pooping during birth. That's not sterile.
Yeah, no, birth is not sterile no matter where it takes place. And in fact, at least in your own home, it's your own germs and your own flora that your baby's going to live in 2 days from now if it had been a hospital birth, right? So yeah, great point. I love that one. That's a good one.
And midwives that like they're for some reason not qualified to like be the sole like caretaker during birth, during pregnancy. I don't know why, but I heard that a lot. Like you're just going for midwife. Like yes.
Well, that is a largely American phenomenon, right? I'm not saying it doesn't happen in any other countries, but certainly in many European countries, midwives are the first line of care when it comes to pregnancy and birth care. Our scopes of practices differ wildly between here and most European countries. So for, how we here in the States do gynecological care and primary care, and we can, send you your prescription for your albuterol and all that stuff. When you get into some of the countries where midwifery is more dominant, they do really stick to pregnancy and birth more. But guess what? They can make more midwives easier than we can because they get bachelor's degrees and get out there and start working. And we have to spend more money and get master's degrees. And now we're moving in a direction where there's many schools are moving towards doctoral degrees. That's a whole other conversation that I'm not going to bug you about today, but it really bugs me because we can't build our midwifery workforce when we keep requiring a higher level of education that is so much more academic than it absolutely needs to be to build a midwifery workforce and solve some of these problems. It drives me crazy, which is why I'm having you on today to tell your story, because I wanted it to be coming from you more than me. And of course, here I am going off the rails.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm now like preaching to anyone who will hear me that like if you're pregnant, consider a midwife. If your pregnancy is non-complicated, you're low risk, consider a home birth maybe, but definitely at least consider a midwife, even if you deliver in hospital, because it's
and as a happy medium, how about we add in, let's build more birth centers, like everywhere.
I would have loved that option. That was my first choice.
Exactly. Okay, my last question is there anything else that you really want to like shout out to the world that you think they need to know about midwives and home birth in particular?
In my experience, it's a completely different level of care that you've likely gotten from any doctor or like anyone else like adjacent to the medical community. It is just so personalized, the level of care that you get. Like it can be as hands-off or as hands-on as you feel comfortable with, and that to me is really important. It's just comfort is the biggest thing, the biggest difference I felt between the two births, and it's really, really important. And you might not think about it going into a pregnancy, but your level of comfort is huge, especially it's life-changing no matter what number birth it is. It's going to change your life, having one kid or having two kids or three. So
when you say comfort at this point, I think you mean more your comfortability with the relationship and the care you're receiving rather than you meaning physical comfort in this case.
I mean both.
Okay.
Yeah. Even like for my second birth, I wasn't physically comfortable since I was pushing out an 11.5-pound baby, but I also was more physically comfortable than I was at the hospital being shoved into different positions when I couldn't feel my legs. So I mean, it's both for sure.
And thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with me, because I've definitely wanted to like connect all the dots where I had missing pieces, because I like catch up with you randomly and get little bits here and there, but it's so nice to have the whole story documented. And again, I just felt it was super important to have people hear what I believe to be the most common. I think there's research that supports this, just that people are much more likely to have a home birth with their second baby. And I think that that's fine the way that goes. I do want more people having their first baby to feel comfortable making this choice, but I'm also like, okay, you got to do what you got to do. As I said before, you can only have a baby where you feel most comfortable. And if that happens to be in the hospital for your first baby, it's got to be there. That's all there is to it. But if it's got to be in the hospital, you can have a mix of the two. You can have a midwife and a hospital birth. There's this happy medium.
Yep. Believe me, I am like anyone who will listen to me, that's what I'm telling them. So
Cool. Awesome. And well, at some point, we may have to catch up more about your pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coaching and your own journey and physical recovery in that. But in the meantime, I will hopefully lay eyes on you in real life soon enough.
yeah.
Thanks for being here today.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for hearing my story.
Hey everyone, it's me, Tanya, your host here at the Mother Wit podcast. You know I sometimes invite my clients on the show to talk about their birth stories and postpartum experiences, but I want to tell you a little bit more about what those clients and I actually do together. I started Mother Wit to help people in the perinatal period achieve their health and wellness goals. That means whether you're hoping to conceive and struggling with high blood pressure or high blood sugar, or you're having trouble managing anxiety or depression in the postpartum period, or maybe you just need support and advocacy between prenatal or postpartum visits, I can help. Get a discount on your first consultation with me at motherwitmaternity.com using the code FIRSTCONSULT 10% off. That's 10% symbol, all one word. I'm looking forward to working with you and maybe having you on the show too.